All right, so this evening nothing too intellectual or too heavy, but still quite interesting, and it's really other little ways in which I've come across that help me kind of ground into sort of emptiness, which aren't the sort of traditional methods, but nevertheless quite useful. So one of the arguments that I found in the book, which was quite useful, was this idea of things transforming into other things. And the example they used was a seed growing into a sprout, which would then grow into a sapling, which would then grow into a tree. But if you imagine a seed and you watch it sprout, a seed is different to a sprout, correct? Everyone would agree a sprout is a sprout and a seed is a seed. But really think about, when does a seed turn into a sprout? So is it when it starts to swell a little bit from the water that it's absorbed? Is it when the outside of the seed husk just begins to crack? Is it just when the white starts to show, or is it when there's a little bit of green shoot that's coming through the crack of the seed? You know, if you try to think, well, that's a seed, that's a seed, that's a seed, that's a seed, that's a seed. Is it a seed or is it a sprout? There's a point there where, when things transform from one thing to another, you think, well, no, it's not a seed anymore, but potentially it's not a sprout. And that kind of helped me. When I contemplated that, it would put me into this zone of like, it stops the mind. You sort of go, there's no explanation, it's gone, the mind's just gone. And so it puts you into a state of emptiness. So I used that for a while. A similar one, which is the basis for the book The Power of Now, which is the big old title one, bestseller by Eckhart Tolle. And the title of the book is The Power of Now, and he says that now is all there is. There is no future and is no past, which is obvious, but it's when you think about it, it's incredibly profound. So there's no past. So if we look around us, all of this stuff is present when? It's present in the now, which is an infinitesimally small time. In fact, it is no time, really. Just 1 billionth of a second previous, and this stuff doesn't exist. And in the future, 1 billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a second in the future, it also doesn't exist. So all of this whole universe, you could say, or this whole world exists. That's it, in the now. So you can imagine this razor blade of time where everything exists, and then outside of that, nothing exists. Again, it may not do anything for you, but it may be that as you contemplate that, it's quite, it stops the mind and it makes you think, wow, that's truly amazing that all of this that we see only exists in this small sliver of time. So that sort of emptiness of time. And in fact, Robert Bayer even says, if you can grasp the emptiness of time, that's a really powerful way to enter. It's a very powerful concept. Because if you see that time doesn't exist, that really is a powerful way to see the emptiness of everything.
That's very hard, though, for your mind to comprehend that quantum physics stuff. Like,
well, actually, we're going to get there. You can try it. Like I read the Eckhart Tolle book when I was on retreat. And as a result of that, I instantly went into pity. which is, you know, a form of rapture, just by contemplating that one thought. So it can be a powerful thought.
But could do your head in too. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
well, that's sort of the way. That's sort of what it's supposed to do.
Oh, okay. Right.
These concepts kind of not do your head in, but the rational mind.
Yeah.
The rational mind can't cope anymore, so it just kind of stops.
Yeah.
And at that point, the awareness takes over and it feels into it.
Because it's not so much the time, but the form of reincarnation, because that just blows reincarnation out of the water. But there's no past, no future, so therefore the poor Indians, they lose their thing with the reincarnation. But then, people remember those things. Do they come in with it in their DNA, or that's where my mind likes to go with it. But there is no reincarnation. It's all happening now.
Yeah, some of these we're actually going to get to, so I kind of don't want to spoil it. One of the things which I really love is modern science and quantum mechanics and things like that. So I think it's really powerful for me, and it may not work for you, but I'm going to go through some ideas of quantum physics and give you some idea of how incredibly beyond our mind this universe is, according to science. So the first is simply this, that we know already that no matter how solid something is, even steel and anything, no matter how solid it seems, it is 99.999% space. So the molecules of iron are, so far apart, there's just a space in between these molecules. But then as you look at a molecule, there's electrons. Well, actually the electrons go around multiple molecules, but still. The electrons and then the protons and neutrons are even smaller inside the nucleus of a element. Yeah. So this is in completely space. So when a highly powerful gamma ray, like a strong electromagnetic particle, comes from outer space, there are certain of the strongest particles which will pass right through the Earth without touching a single proton or neutron. Because you can go right through, if you're fast enough and you're small enough, you can go right through the Earth and not touch anything. That's how spacious it is. Right through the Earth. And so, they have these, when they have these detectors, they have these tanks full of billions and billions of gallons of water and special water to try to detect these gamma rays and things like that. And they might get one every 5 years. Even though there's millions of them going through every second, they're just waiting for one to just happens to hit a proton or a neutron at the right angle, that it then creates a shower of subatomic particles which they can then detect in these detectors. So that's incredible just as it is. But it goes further still, because a proton is made up of 3 colors of quarks. Okay? So even a proton is full of space, being made up of quarks. Okay? But quarks don't have any mass, so they don't actually exist. They have colors. So a quark has a color. A quark is a subatomic particle. It's a real basis of the particle, and a proton is made up of these smaller subatomic particles. And so ultimately, it's not even the solidity is not even solid, because the most smallest particles are just energetic vibrations. They're not really particles.
It's flashing on and off, isn't it? Like, aren't we flashing on and off?
Well, that's the interesting thing is that if you take one of these subatomic particles, within the proton, the quarks are held together by the strong nuclear force. And the strong nuclear force, interesting, is opposite to sort of gravity and the electromagnetic force, in that the further you pull apart the quarks, the stronger the force gets. So it means that theoretically it's impossible to pull quarks apart, because the further you pull them apart, you get up to an infinite amount of force that is pulling them back together. But they do get pulled apart, and so your question, how do they get pulled apart? Well, what happens is when the force is strong enough, it pulls into existence two more quarks, a quark and an antiquark. So out of nothing, particles will arise, and they will pair up with the other quarks that are being pulled apart, because you can never ever have, you can either have pairs of quark and antiquark, or quarks of three different colors. You can't have anything else. You can't have a quark by itself because of the strong nuclear force. So that means that matter comes out of nothing. And in fact, they say that the Big Bang just came out of nothing. Just came out of nothing. There was nothing here before the Big Bang, and suddenly the Big Bang came in, and time created, and matter created, and all of that.
So those quarks, are they like parallel universe? Like same on the other side of something?
Well, I'm just not postulating any of that. I'm just postulating what physics has found. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So when you meditate on that things can come out of nothing, and that things aren't even real in the sense that they're not solid, they're just vibrations in energy, and they just, at that level, they don't appear as we see them to appear, because they don't have matter. They have spin and they have color, and these are just qualities that mathematicians have just sort of dreamt up to try to explain the phenomena of what these quarks are. They have sort of no idea what it is tangibly. It's beyond our conception. It's a bit like the dog and the bee and the human. At that level, you would not recognize what matter is. So clearly what we're seeing, because we're seeing quarks, that's what we're seeing. But we are seeing something which is, by science, completely illusory. Completely illusory. In fact, there's so much lack of matter here from a scientific point of view. There was for a while, I don't know if it's still valid, people who are proposing that all matter exists outside of the universe, and somehow there's a holographic image of the matter on the inside of the universe, because they failed to find anything solid here by using normal particle detectors, things like that. So that's incredible. The next thing, there's something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It's usually taught in year 11 physics or year 12 physics. And it says that for subatomic particles, this is even just at the level of electrons, which are huge compared to quarks, you cannot know the position and the speed of an electron at the same time within this Heisenberg's uncertainty principle term. So if you look at an electron, then you can work out its position, but you don't know what the speed is. And if you work out the speed, you can't know what the position is. And it's not because it's just too difficult. It's literally baked into the laws of the universe that you cannot know those two things accurately together, because somehow they impinge on each other. the location and the speed actually are parts of the same whole. You can't know it accurately. And like similar stuff with light, you've heard the idea of light. If you look at it one way, it looks like a particle, and if you look at it another way, it looks like a wave. So in many respects, light is like a wave which has no, like it's a wave. It's like a wave in an ocean. A wave in an ocean is not a particle type of thing. It's a wave in a continuum. But looked at another way, it suddenly becomes a solid little lump of matter. So which is true? Which is true? Neither and both. Depends on how you look at it. Now, another thing which they're discovering is that the act of viewing something changes what you see. So if you've heard of Schrodinger's cat experiment, basically the experiment says that two quantum particles live in a state of transition such that they're in a state of transition, and you can separate them across the universe, and if you look at one, you can see one, and then the other will take on a certain state. Okay, but until you actually observe it, they are both in a transitionary state. All right, and so that means that instantly there's been communication between one particle instantly across the universe to the other particle. So it's like, how does that happen?
Shape-shifted.
Well, it's sort of, it blows the mind, which is what it's meant to do, because if you meditate on this stuff, it's just, the rational mind doesn't have a theory for it. And science, the best scientists in the world don't have a theory for this kind of stuff. And, there's been a lot of other science which shows that by looking at something, we change we define it, and therefore we change it. So I don't know. There's a movie called What the Bleep. I don't know if you've seen it. And the one I quite like is there's a basketball bouncing on a court. And until you look at where that basketball is, you do not know where that basketball is on the court. Now, according to quantum science, what it means is that basketball is bouncing everywhere on the court at the same time. Okay? It is literally bouncing everywhere on it until you look at it, and at that time it assumes a particular position. And we go, that basketball is there. That's the equivalent of what's happening.
So they think that if we keep going with our science and learn more and more and more, teletransportation will be the future sort of thing.
Well, I mean,
down the track.
We can go down that track. What I'm trying to do is give you sort of views from science which stop the mind.
Yeah.
And show you that even science is now saying everything is empty.
Yeah.
We're starting to go in that direction. And these things are real because they're designing quantum computers which have a bit value of 1, 0, or indeterminate, which is a superimposition. They call it superimposition. So it's both a 1 and a 2, or both a 0 and a 1 at the same time, both and neither. And so they're actually using it as a third bit, and it makes the computers incredibly powerful to have a 3-bit bit instead of a 2-bit bit. So what I sort of, sometimes when I meditate, it's a bit like that last meditation where you imagine all the particles. Well, the particles on my skin, the quarks and the protons and the neutrons, are no different to the protons and the neutrons just 1 millimeter outside of my skin in the air. If you looked at that subatomic level, you wouldn't see any difference between the two. So again, it's a point of view. If if you look at anything, if you look close enough, you will not see the difference between the atoms of the cup and outside the cup. They look the same. They're made of the same stuff. It's just the relationship between them is slightly different, so that at a certain angle, it looks like a cup and it looks like air. But other than that, we can't tell the difference. So, you know, for me, because I'm a sort of scientific person, that sort of proof from a scientific point of view allows me to kind of just feel into that more and go, oh my God, all of this is empty and it's just a subtle energy and it's no different to the energy right next to me. And it's no different to the energy in you or you or you or you. And it can help you feel into this idea of the oneness of all things, you know, or the mystery of all things. So I find the ideas of science and quantum science quite effective in being more meditations on emptiness, which obviously weren't talked about at the time of the Buddha because we didn't have the science to see that deeply into matter. But they accord very well with what he said. So, any questions or comments on that? Yeah. So the last one is very quick.
So we shouldn't be contemplating it. It's too much for our little brains, isn't it? Like,
So it's going to be a light.
Well, I like to contemplate it, and it helps me in my meditation.
but we can't work it out. We can't work anything
Again.
out, can we? Just reflect.
No,
on
it's
it.
just you don't need to work anything out. You just need to understand that if you look really, really closely, you couldn't tell the difference between the cup and the air outside the cup. It just looked like protons and neurons, and with lots of space in between.
Right.
But it zoomed out where we're viewing them from. That one looks solid. This one looks empty. But really, there's
Again, we have to look at what's the end result here.
Mm.
The end result is not necessarily to understand quantum mechanics. We leave that up to the scientists.
Yeah.
But first of all, I am immensely curious about what is this world anyway. So I find it fascinating. So that's one thing. Second of all, it helps put me into a state of mystery where it's just, I'm amazed by the universe, and in that state of mystery there's a sense of awe, and awe is a great doorway into deeper meditation states. And thirdly, this is all pointing to a reality which, if grasped, when grasped, actually creates awakening. And fifth, you know, the other reason we're using all of this is to reduce dukkha. So if these techniques help you reduce dukkha, then use them, because that's what we want, is we want you to reduce dukkha, because then you're in the right direction.
So go back some centuries, and the mystics, what were they mystical about? Like, what was their, because, you know, a lot of the
Being led into gold.
leaders and that now like started off being inspired by the mystics, but
Well,
back then what were they?
it's interesting that in virtually every tradition around the world, there's always been the mystics and the scholars. Every tradition has had these two branches: Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, like all of them, American Indians, all of them seem to have the mystics who go away and resonate with things, and then the scholars. And these have always somewhat been in conflict with each other, because the scholars want to be able to think it for it to be true, and the mystics try to say, well, it's beyond concepts. So what I'm trying to explain to you is beyond concepts. But they are both important in helping a religion to go forward. However, what happens over time is, at first, they start off very together, if you like, and the mystics try to explain what they're experiencing, and then the scholars try to explain it in a type of language that we understand using logic, but over time they tend to split apart. And when explaining to the lay population, the population tend to gravitate towards these scholars because they can understand it. Whereas the mystics, they try to explain themselves and it just comes across as what we say, woo-woo. We talk about, oh, he's a bit woo-woo. He's like way out there. He's, a bit crazy. We put them in the camp of they're a bit crazy. They're a bit woo-woo. And so there's always this shift. And then eventually that shift gets so great, then the mystics tend to get persecuted. And they are literally burned at the stake as witches. Or and this has been repeated in traditions all around the world, where they start off together and over the centuries, I would say, they split apart, and it gets to a point where the conservatives and the scholars, they are so in their camp that they actually start to see this side as witchcraft and they demonize it. And so, in the Christian tradition, there's the unknowing cloud, and there's these parts of the Bible which no one talks about because they try to keep it hidden because it's the mystical part, and they don't understand it, so they sort of downplay it. And a lot of people get inspired by that, and they join the church, but because a lot of the priests are brought up in a very rigorous scholarly tradition, they just downplay it. They just don't go there because they can't explain it because they're not mystics. So that has been a sort of a feature in traditions all over the world for as long as there's been religion.
Is it alchemy? Wasn't that the latest thing that
mystics get into all of this stuff. They're into, because on that mystic level, everything becomes integrated, and they start to see. They say that Om is the sound of the creation of the universe. And that just sounds like, why would you even say that? So, and then they get into alchemy and this, and you start to see meaning in everything. You see meaning in the weirdest things. And who's to know? It might be the truth, We don't know until we get to that level what they're talking about. But my inkling is that because the mind is being projected, we start to see meaning in everything, and for us it is true, but it may not be true. Our meaning may not necessarily be as powerful or as true for other people.
Therefore it's not science, is it? Because science, it has to keep showing the same result, doesn't it?
Correct.
True
Science.
Yeah.
So that's right. It's not provable.
Yeah.
But at those levels, it sort of goes beyond the mind. And also, I think there's lots of mystics that kind of go halfway along the journey, and they get glimpses of a thing they know as the beyond, but then in their attempts to describe it, they may not describe it as accurately as, say, the Buddha. And so it comes across very strange. So because everything is reflected through our minds, like everything is downloaded through our minds, and our minds are still, to a certain extent, sullied by all of our beliefs, even when we become enlightened. So they naturally come through. And so when the meaning comes through, if we've had like a Christian background, we see angels, and we see Jesus, and we see the cross, and we see the meaning in the cross. And that we might literally see that. Like, we will see angels. Whereas if you've been brought up in a Buddhist culture, you'll see bodhisattvas, and you'll see Buddhas. And so the way I look at it is, if you imagine outside the sunlight, you can't actually see the light, can you? We see what the light does. We can see trees because of light, but we can't really see the light. Now you imagine one of these stained glass windows, you know, that's red and purple and yellow and green, and if the sunlight comes through, we can see the different colours. And so I see that as kind of the different religions. It's the same light shining through people's minds, but depending on the colour of the tint of the mind, you see different colours. And so one person will say, God is blue. And another person will say, well, you're right, there's God, but it's red. No, what I see is yellow. And they start arguing over the colour because they've seen God, but they've only seen God through a sort of a tinted lens, and they haven't seen the deepest meaning, which you can't see. Because they're already trying. As soon as one starts to describe what is the beyond, then you're already wrong, because the beyond cannot be comprehended by the conceptual mind. And you have to use a conception to explain it to someone else. You know, so real people, when they get awakened, they go, well, what was it like? And I'm like, can't tell you. I just can't tell you. And that's as close to the truth as you can get, because it's not knowable by the conceptual mind.
Are there modern day mystics?
Sure.
Like who?
Sure.
What do they do?
That's the same as I've always done.
Get on the internet, I'll show you.
Pretty real.
AI.
You've got hundreds of
Artificial
subscribers.
And the trouble is that there are also modern day charlatans, and for us, it's hard to tell the truth. And I'm not even saying that in a derogatory way. You know, there are people who genuinely have had a deep experience, and they're like this arguing for the light, and they have had a genuine experience, but they themselves believe that they've seen it all, and so they want to share it, and they're genuine in wanting to share it, and they're like, I really want to explain, you know, there's Abraham, and Abraham is actually an Egyptian. I'm telling you, Abraham is from the pyramids, and he has come to tell us, you know, and they're honest, and that's how they perceived it, and it is not sort of, it may not be quackery, it might be, but it may not be. So, you know,
They channel, don't they? They channel
Yeah.
different ones.
at the end of the day, does it reduce dukkha, or does it not reduce dukkha? If it doesn't help you, don't use it. The other thing you can tell, which the Buddha says, is if you want to go to a teacher, they say be very, very careful, go to the teacher and assess him for several weeks to decide whether or not he's worthy of teaching. And the thing you should be looking for is how compassionate the guru is. Because as a person becomes awakened, they become very, very giving, compassionate, and selfless. And so you might go to a guru who can produce water out of thin air and can levitate to the moon. But if he's, you know, horrible to his students, you've got to question whether he might be wonderful, but is he sort of authentic enough to follow? We will have that conversation about how to make $1 million. There are these people out there that are saying, I can make you $1 million and whatever. And it's like, there's something not right there, because they're aggressively marketing you, you know, and you go, for me, I just don't want to go there because there's something wrong. I remember seeing this show on this guy like Tony Robbins. In fact, even Tony Robbins, to be honest, if you notice, you know, you can see behind the scenes, he's sort of getting a bit agitated in that. And so even though Tony Robbins is undoubtedly the sort of master of NLP and changing people, and I'm not saying anything, because people have really flowered and become really great people, but he himself he's not awake, but you can see it in his character. You can see it in just the way he's still got the selfing going on. He's still got selfing going on. At least I can see it.
No, I can see it too. And his wife, this new wife, he's got. Yeah,
So
it's uncomfortable to look at.
And And I'm not even saying, you know, if he came to town and I got free tickets, I'd probably still go and see him.
Yeah.
I'd probably still learn something, but I would, but as a Dharma teacher, which he's not obviously proclaiming to be, but I wouldn't take him on sort of as a Dharma teacher because he just doesn't have that. But if you look at someone, you know, some of my teachers, yeah, I mean, Lama Chodak is one of my teachers, and when I'm in his presence, I really do feel like he's completely selfless. Like he's just really special. And interesting, his behaviour is like that, but he's been caught out because he split from his wife and he had another partner. He had another partner. And so he's been vilified by certain people because he is committing an adulterous relationship, because I believe he's still married, but he's living with this other partner, and people won't go and see him for that. But for me, I'm totally okay with that because he's ethical about it. He says, look, the marriage just wasn't working. We've got 2 kids, and she didn't want to not get married, and I left, and he said, I sort of talked to him about it, and he said, look, we were actually living separately in the same house, but on different floors for about 2 years before I moved out and moved in with somebody else. And I believe him.
I didn't think they could get married.
Huh?
What's a Lama do?
He's not. No, he's not ordained.
Ah.
He was ordained for
Right.
some time, but he actually left and he got married. So he's a teacher,
Yeah.
and he wears, if you notice, it's different robes to a monk. Like it's different robes.
Okay.
But for people who are uninitiated, you would see him, and you'd think, oh, he's ordained. But in fact, after his presentation, he just takes his robes off. They're very Tibetan robes.
Yeah.
And but no, he just wears a suit underneath.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very anyway. So even Chuladasa has not he's had controversy.
Yeah.
You know, so
Someone's always trying to pull you down.
but at the same time, you've just got to look to see whether it's out of selfishness or whether it's out of exploration or whatever. It's hard. Basically, it's hard to know.
Discern.
But if you feel like the techniques are creating more expansiveness, freedom, joy, then you're probably going in the right direction. And if you see a teacher and they are you feel genuinely like they're after people's well-being, and you know, I make lots and lots of mistakes. You know, I'm certainly not the best. So yeah, you know, you guys have hung around me, so hopefully I'm doing something a bit right. But you know, I'm certainly not infallible either. But you know, you can get a feel for people, and then there's other people you just don't get a feel for, and then you can be tricked. I mean, I'm sure, you know, there are lots of people who go, I really thought they were the it. You know, I thought that was the best teacher, and it was 2 years before I found out that, you know, actually he wasn't like that at all, or whatever. You know, he turned out to be a nasty pasty. I didn't know that.
Nasty pasty.
But you know,
I've never heard that one before. No.
So yeah. So anyway, it's a bit about mystics and teachers and things like that.
Can I ask a question, a burning question?
Yeah.
You know, you have these little awakenings. It's like I know I'm different now compared to this years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's very hard for me to imagine pre-awakening. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever talked about that?
Pre-awakening?
Yeah, like just as hard as what it would be to imagine awakening, to go back and think,
what was it like?
what was my thinking like pre-awakening?
Yeah.
Something happens where you go, oh, I couldn't explain that to you, so to speak.
No, well, if it's what you seem to be saying, it's very, very true. So in the Finder's course, which we will be doing after this, Jeffrey Martin went and interviewed lots and lots of people that say that they're awakened, up to almost 1,000 or over 1,000, around that figure. And yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff, so you'll be reading all about that stuff. But one thing that is interesting is he found that people who had been awake for several years sort of basically forgot what it was like not to be awakened.
Yeah.
And they would sort of have this attitude, because with awakening, everything is okay. And, people would say, oh, I'm suffering. And you would say, well, that's okay. And it's like, well, I want to be awake. He says, well, you don't have to be. It's okay not to be awake. And they obviously lost touch with kind of how much suffering there is.
Yeah.
Because he's like, well, it's totally okay. If I get cancer and I get really sick, that's okay too. Because they just beyond that. They're beyond that, but they can't understand the people who are not awakened. So that is a phenomenon.
It's a thing. Yeah. Like even trying to imagine what's going on in somebody else's mind.
Yeah.
When we're both observing the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they're manic, and it's like what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people, that is a thing that people who are awake for some time tend to just forget how bad it actually was.
Yeah.
Back on
all
their
the
life,
process
say,
of it. Yeah.
Actually, my life was pretty good.
Yeah.
I got raped a couple of times, and I had no money for 5 years. But all of that was really part of the, like,
Yeah. I know.
I think some of the best journeys, some people could even not agree with this, is when you go through hard things and when you look back on that and you're like, if I had chosen anything different, I wouldn't be where I am and I wouldn't have the mindset that I do.
Correct, yeah. I mean, it's truth that growth often comes out of hardship. And so when you look back on your life, you have to go, well, that was a terrible part of my life, but I wonder whether I would be where I'm at now if I hadn't have gone through that particular hardship.
Yeah.
Can you find peace within hardship though? Like in that moment when you're going through something difficult, can you personally find peace?
Well, lots of people do. So people often have sudden awakenings right in the middle of a crisis, literally on the edge of committing suicide. Eckhart Tolle was one. Apparently, according to him, he just didn't want to live anymore. And if you read his story, he goes, I don't want to live anymore. I just don't want to live anymore. And suddenly he was struck by the idea of, hang on, there's an I don't want me to be alive anymore. There's the I that doesn't want me to be alive. Is there two of us? Is there the I and the me? And that was apparently his epiphany, is there can't be two of us. And that's what sort of spawned his awakening. So he was in the midst of suicidal thoughts when he awoke, and that's actually quite a common story. The Christians call it the way of the cross. So that's
How would you describe being awakened?
no negative emotions,
Right?
no suffering, no dukkha.
No negative emotions.
I think I've experienced that. What was your question? First was about, made me think of something when you said that
About going through hardship
and
feeling at peace.
Yeah, so I've experienced that because, and I try to encourage other people to experience it. Like, for instance, when my mum died, and to this day, I feel sad. I feel really sad. But I'm happy to feel sad because that's the kind of person I want to be. Like, imagine if I didn't feel sad, that, well, what's the alternative? Like, I don't feel sad when I think of that my mum's not here, I don't want to be that sort of person that doesn't feel anything. So I'm actually happy to feel sad, but it's not sad like it bringing me down sad. It's like a sad that you hold and I accept it and I want it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Like a natural sad.
Right?
Right?
You check me if you.
Yeah, I was just while you were having that.
So that kind of is what you're describing. So it's peace at feeling sad, but I don't see that sadness, that residual sadness, as a negative emotion.
Well, I think the best ever experienced personally for me is when I was homeless.
Yeah, I know.
Such a bad in the world of society, it's such a bad thing to go through. But for me, it was the most incredible thing that happened in 24 years.
There you go. There you go.
Life changing.
So, yep. So hardships are hardships, and we don't wish them on anyone. But the truth is that people grow through hardships.
The most.
So, and the truth is, you cannot stop them. They will come. You know, unless you're the luckiest person. But then, are you the luckiest person? Because without hardships, maybe you remain immature the whole time. There's plenty of very rich kids who, at the age of 50, are basically like little kids because they've never had the maturity to have to grow up, and they're selfish and all of that. So anyway, so the last one which I've got here, which I found useful, was actually just using my perception to notice things coming in and out of existence. And the one which actually works for me is a bell. And interestingly, a bell is the symbol of wisdom in the Buddhist tradition. So here, see the Buddhas, you know, they've got the lotus leaf and the bell, or the vajra and the bell. Sometimes the vajra is skillful means, but the bell is wisdom. And why? Because sound comes into existence from where? From nowhere. It just came into existence, didn't it? Now, scientists could say, well, it was because they created the vibrations. You know, this is a physical thing. And suddenly sound just comes out of nowhere. And where's it going? It's going into nothingness. So from nothingness comes something, and it just disappears back into nothingness. And so if you just listen to the sound and let it take you into emptiness, it can actually help you as well, both the way that the sound disappears, but also the fact that it does disappear. So there's no continuation. And it's said that one form of sort of awareness and awakening is, they say, it's sort of like fireworks in the night sky. So it's all black, and then there's just sound here, vision here, smell here, you know, feeling here. It's like everything just appearing and disappearing, appearing and disappearing all the time as perceptions come and go. So that's, without labeling it, that's sort of what's happening, is perceptions are just coming and going all the time. And if you don't label them, it's just everywhere. So that is also the way which I found useful sometimes in meditation. Alright, I think we'll pause the video, but if you guys want to have any more questions, you're welcome to keep questioning us.